The 139th day of class, Stages of Genocide. Now, this is one of the most difficult, if not the most difficult topic to talk about in the course of world history, but it's essential that we learn about it. So first of all, what is genocide? Genocide, on a very simple level, is the systematic and deliberate extermination of a group of people. And I'm sad to report, genocide is not new. There are instances from the Old Testament in the book of Samuel with the Amalekites all the way to the 21st century with Darfur. And throughout our history, there have been attempts to eliminate a group of people from the earth. So here's a question. Why would we have a need to learn about something so horrible, so terrible, such an indictment of humanity? Well, on the simplest of level, to make sure it doesn't happen again. And if you have people united, and if you have people fighting against a genocide, you can prevent a genocide. Now, there are 10 steps of genocide according to Dr. Gregory Stanton at the Genocide Watch Group. And if interventions are done at the early steps, it can prevent genocide. So what my hope is that you see the pattern that genocides follow in the hopes that you can identify them and work to make sure they don't happen again. So step number one is classification. Us versus them. In and of itself, there's nothing harmful about that. In looking at other people, we instantly classify ourselves in terms of age and in terms of gender and so on and so forth. But when you distinguish people based on nationality, ethnicity, race, and religion under the premise of dividing, or you think they are less than you, or you set them apart from you because you want nothing to do with them, this is the beginning of genocide, classification. Now, the second stage of genocide is called symbolization. Now, symbolization is an outward symbol to identify you as part of an ethnicity, a race, a religion, or nationality. So, for instance, here in Cambodia, you see the blue scarf. During the Holocaust, Jewish people had to wear this yellow star upon their lapel. The Nazi soldiers had this sheet to identify the symbolization that the Nazis did. So, for instance, you can see that even though it's in German, the homosexual, which is a pink triangle. And then you see if you are homosexual and Jewish, Juden, Jewish, so you have a pink triangle with a yellow triangle making the Star of David. So when you make somebody have an outward symbol to identify them, this is symbolization. This is the second stage of genocide. Stage 3 is discrimination. It's segregation. It's separate groups in housings and school and transport and eating places. And oftentimes I have students who will try to draw a parallel between the American Civil Rights Movement that they learned about in U.S. history and claim that is genocide. That is not genocide. It's certainly discrimination. But discrimination in and of itself is not genocide, the destruction and elimination of a group of people. But discrimination entails prohibiting voting by members, firing group from certain professions, requiring certain passes, making people jump through hoops to get basic rights, civil rights. So discrimination is stage 3. Now stage 4 is called dehumanization. And what we see in genocide is the group they are targeting ceases to be human. They become vermin. They become rats. They become something less than human. And I personally think there's a psychology that most people are unable to kill another person if you are healthy. But a lot of us are able to kill a pest, a rat, a lice, mosquito, and so forth. So you look here in Rwanda, they were referred to as cockroaches, and the Nazi propaganda shows this very inhuman-looking Jewish person. So once you start taking a human being and making them less than human, this is stage 4. We're deepening these stages of genocide and getting to the unfortunate end of these stages. Now, stage 5 is organization. Now, genocide is a group crime, so it must be organized. On a logistical level, it's very difficult for the planning of an elimination of a group of people. So the state will organize items such as arms. So, for instance, here in Rwanda, they are unloading a truck full of machetes. Who's going to pay for these items? Who's going to conduct the actual business at hand? Plans are made by the elites for a final solution. In fact, in Nazi Germany, the Nazis referred to the killing of those they considered undesirable the final solution. So stage 5 is organization. And again, going back to my earlier point, if we do not stop genocide early, it festers and gets worse till the inevitable end. Now, stage 6 is polarization, where extremists will drive groups apart. They will physically separate people, and there will be hateful propaganda and print media to separate people into groups. There will be laws to pass that will be passed to forbid intermarriage. Certain people can't talk to one another. People who are leaders on the other side will be intimidated or killed or what have you. And you can see this here in Nazi Germany. In fact, the word ghetto comes from Jewish people being put into the undesirable part of Venice, Italy. And this is one of the earlier forms of polarization that happens. So polarization is step 6 or stage 6. Stage 7 is preparation. At this point, this is, if we don't stop it, if the world doesn't stop it, whether it be NATO or the UN or whomever, it's too late. This is the final step. So steps must be taken to stop regimes at earlier steps. At this point, there's planning, there's conspiracies of when to start, there's military buildups. Essentially, they're getting ready to hit the go button. They're getting ready to say green light, let's move on, which brings us to stage 7. Probably the most well-known example and tragic example would be the Nazi work camps and death camps that occurred during World War II. Now, this is Auschwitz, and the gates of Auschwitz, Arbeit macht frei, work makes you free. And just the absolute destruction of humanity, the cruelty, I really have no words to what went on in these camps. And you have to think about this. The Nazis knew what they were doing. They had to lay down the tracks. They had to establish which buildings. They had to bring the equipment in. So stage 7, preparation is not easy. And it shows definitely malice aforethought, that this is not a spontaneous act. It's a very well thought out act. Which brings us to stage 8, persecution. At this point, people are separated, people are brutalized, property is taken. If you recall Kristallnacht from World War II, where Jewish businesses, their glass was broken. It means night of broken glass. Businesses were set on fire and broken, and people brought into the street and beaten. At this point, the genocide has a green light, and it's on. And stage 9, it's the logical end to things, which would be the extermination. And you see here the Einsatzgruppen killing people with rifles. Eventually the Nazis become more efficient and bring in Zyklon B, this gas that would kill people in mass, and then they would take those people out and then gas some more. And these camps were working around the clock to do this. Extermination changes by genocide, but it's essentially the killing. In Rwanda, it was machetes. In the Armenian genocide, people were put into caves and fires were started at the base of the caves to asphyxiate them. But most genocide is committed by governments, and this is the real horror show stuff. This is the gruesome stuff. And, whether that be by long walks or starvation. Now, there's euphemistic language used by the killers. They say extermination is not used because they think they are cleansing. They are getting rid of impurities. They are putting down a problem. So this very euphemistic language permeates the thinking of the killers as probably a psychological means to let them do that. And then stage 10 is denial. Denial occurs during and after the genocide. It's, this denial carries on, it triples the probability of further genocide. And denial extends crime of genocide to future generations. I think of Turkey right now, 100 years later, and they have still denied. And the tactics of denial are very predictable. You attack the truth tellers. You say they committed the crimes. You know, a good defense is a good offense, right? Deny or minimize the evidence. Say, no, that's not exactly true. That's hyperbole. That's embellished. When in reality it's true. Deny genocidal intent, blame natural forces, say it was a war, blame the victims, deny the facts that fit certain legal definitions. You know, you claim that bringing it up now is going to ruin things in modern times, and that sort of thing. Now, the glaring exception to denial would be Nazi Germany. But I personally think it's because it is the most documented, not one of the most documented historical events in history. You really cannot deny that. And people who do deny the Holocaust existed, I personally think are pinheads, based upon the body of evidence that is so clear to the fact that it did happen. So to wrap up these stages, number 1 is classification, us versus them. Number 2, symbolization, wearing symbols, outward signs that you're part of a group. Discrimination, the beginning of this mistreatment. Dehumanization, you are less than human. Organization, planning a genocide. Polarization, separating you from the group. Preparation, getting those final steps in order before you declare the green light for genocide. Then persecution, very intense mistreatment, extermination, death, and then denial. So again, why do we learn about genocide? We learn about genocide to identify them in the future in the hopes it never happens again. And although it has happened throughout history, that doesn't mean with enlightened minds and in modern times it can be prevented. And I certainly hope it can be prevented. And hopefully you know enough to see it for yourself. So thank you for watching.